All right, so welcome to the book of Exodus, and welcome to those who will be viewing this recording at a later date. All right, so as we consider the book of Exodus, we want to consider, the importance of looking at not just the New Testament books, but also the Old Testament books as well. And when we think about Exodus and any book of the Bible for that matter, all of them, any of them can be studied in isolation, but of course, one's grasp of God's will and purpose will be better if we can be able to have a grasp of all the books in the Bible. But certainly we can look at and highlight certain books that maybe bear some relevance to our context and our situation and whatever we are going through at the moment. So Exodus was one of these. Actually, Exodus was one of the books that was suggested in the survey that we did last year. And I guess it made an impression on on some people's minds, mainly minds. But so excited to do this, excited to look at this. I'll tell you what we'll not be doing. We will not be taking a deep exegetical approach, which means we won't be going through verse by verse by verse. Of course, we won't be able to do that in 3 months. I don't think we'll be able to do that in 3 years. But what we will be doing, we will be able to build a solid foundation from which one can further their studies in the Old Testament, particularly the book of Exodus. So one of the things I like to do when I'm teaching is I always like to challenge myself and challenge the listeners as well. So during this class, there will be some challenges. I will be asking you to do some things. What I encourage you to do is to simply do it. It will be for your benefit. In understanding, books better, understanding God better, because this is God's revelation to us, the Bible. So the more we can learn it and understand it and keep it in our hearts, is the closer we could walk with God. And so I want to encourage you to take the challenge and go through the book. And what I'll try to do is to give you a very good looking skeleton, a very good looking foundation from which you can do further building, lessons, and it's really, the possibilities are endless. So this book, a book of transition. The last time I taught this book, we highlighted things like that. I think I did it in point. That there's a lot of some transitions, some significant transitions that take place in the book with Moses and with the people as well. It's a book that reveals God. And so when we study the book, when we look at it throughout the next 12 weeks, excluding tonight, we will see how the book reveals God. It's a book that can help deal with personal change, because as I said before, the people, they would have moved from where they were. There was a huge transition that was taking place in the book. And of course, the book shows the value of God's people. A lot of people, they have issues with self-worth and self-value and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at this book, we see how prized Israel was. And that translates today to the Christian. And even for the person that is not in Christ, the message for that person is that, this is what God desires. God desires you to be part of his special people, and this is something that would please God in a huge way. So these are some of the things, some of the reasons why we want to take a look at this book. So tonight's lesson would really be introductory stuff. Whenever I teach a book, I always try to encourage people to not miss the first class that I teach. That's the worst class to miss when I do a book, because I try to get the foundation laid properly in that session. So the chunks that we look at in the next following weeks will be easier to chew on and digest. So just excuse me tonight, because tonight it may sound a bit technical, but the technical stuff that will come up in the class, it's just assume that it's absolutely necessary. I try to, just stay away from too much of the technical stuff and the seminary stuff, and just hone in on the message and purpose of the book as best as I could. And so but we have to lay the foundation first. And so this session tonight is going to deal with that. It's going to, if you have any queries about the book, tonight is a good night to ask it. I mean, you can ask it anytime, but, tonight we actually be looking at some of those things. So, tonight is a good night to ask it. So, and again, it goes without saying that this study is not exhaustive. So don't expect to get every single thing during the next 3 months. But really, again, we're just trying to lay a foundation to do further studies in the book and hopefully ignite a spark in your spirit to do some more studies. So we did a course in December, how to study the Bible. So hopefully some of those things, you can go back and look at it and use it as we go through the book together. All right. So let's just get a move on from this page here. And let's go a little bit further. All right. So some of the goals and objectives, let me just put them out there really quickly. Well, one of the goals, I would like us to read the entire book at least once. All right. So what I'll do, I will send out the outline of how we'll be approaching the book, the different chapters we'll be looking at each week between weeks 2 to weeks 13. I will send that out. The presentation for tonight, I already sent it to Sister Cindy. So that will be distributed. But I'm also going to send an outline of how we'll be, kind of syllabus then, of how we'll be approaching the book. You can use that syllabus / outline to read the book, right? So I'll be letting you, like, for instance, week 2, which is next week, we'll be going through chapters 1 through 3 and so forth. And so you can use that as a reading plan. Alternatively, if you read 1 chapter per day, you will be able to cover this entire book twice in the time it takes us to go through these 12 sessions. All right, so you could do that method as well. You could read just 1 chapter a day. It has 40 chapters. We'll be using up about 80 to 85 days. So that's roughly about twice with a few days to spare. Or if you want, you could go at a faster pace and read the book multiple times during the class, right? I personally am trying to read it at least 4 times while we do the class. And it's just going to help, as we mentioned in the How to Study the Bible class, it's going to reinforce certain things. It's going to help you smoothly transition through the book. And it's going to make the bigger chunks a little bit easier to chew and a little bit easier to swallow, right? So I want to encourage you. This is one of the assignments. Read the book at least once, at the minimum, right? So next week, we'll be getting into chapters 1, 2, and chapter 3. So my expectation is that we read chapters 1, 2, and 3 before we come to the class. It's just going to help make things make a little more sense, right? So when we are quoting a verse from chapter 3, you're already familiar with what the contents of chapter 3 are. So you will be able to follow along pretty easily in the class, right? So read the book and do the reading assignment as best as you could. All right, so some of the goals and objectives, continuing with that, to know how the book presents God. Every book in the Bible presents God. Some years ago, I read a book by the name of, I think, Portrait of God is the name of the book, by a brother, Frank Chester. And what he was able to do, he was able to give a short commentary on every book of the Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And he showed Christ from every single book. Really, really amazing job. And so definitely this book is God-breathed, and it's, it has some things in it about God. And so we want to see how the book presents God, because different books present God, in different ways. They highlight different attributes. And so we want to see what Exodus has to contribute to our knowledge of God. Also, to know the major themes that are in the book. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. To know the purpose and message of the book. That's obvious, of course. To know how the book fits into the overall message of the Bible. So we're going to talk about that a little bit in the introduction. And of course, there'll be all the goals and objectives. There'll be a sprinkling of them as we go through the 12 weeks. So don't be worried about that. We're going to gradually, accomplish all of these. But we want to know how the book fits into the overall message of the Bible, because the Bible is one book. As some people say, one book with 66 chapters. So we want to see what Exodus has to contribute to the overall theme and message of the Bible itself. All right, we want to know how the book foreshadows Jesus. All right, and as I mentioned, give that reference to the book by Frank Chesser, and he was able to highlight Jesus from all the books of the Bible. And Exodus has some things about Jesus. So as we go through the book, we will pull them out. All right, so we're not gonna get a list with all the, all the references, or maybe I'll do one for you at the end of the class. But what we're gonna do primarily is, as we go through the various chapters each week, if we have a block that presents something about Jesus, we're going to talk about it and we're going to highlight it. Like, for instance, I think it's chapter 12. When we get to that block of scripture, we're going to highlight some things about Christ in that part. All right, but we want to be sure that we cover this as well. Also, number 7, most importantly, to apply its principles to a contemporary setting. We are not in Egypt. We are nowhere near Egypt. We are nowhere near the culture that they had in that day. But of course, the message is timeless. So we want to see how best we can apply the principles to our setting today. We will attempt to do this in every class. How I designed the class, I want to see if we could have a discussion, not this week, but probably this week. But after every class, we want to be able to not just get information, but be able to just try and formulate it, try and put it into a practical setting, because this is what's going to help you during the week. When Bible class is over and problems come on Friday, we want to make sure that what you learned in class on Wednesday, you can use something from it to apply to whatever situation that may be before you. All right, so that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully we'll be able to accomplish this. Now, let me just talk a little bit about this. As I mentioned to you before, just bear with me for this session only. If I have some stuff that we need to get through, because I want to lay the foundation tonight. So just forgive me if it's just a bit much, but the slides, the presentation will be sent out. The recording will be on YouTube. So don't be worried about if you miss anything. So definitely, if you have questions, feel free at any time to stop me and ask the questions, right? Sometimes I just get going and I go and I leave everybody behind. So please just be aware of that and help me help you. Right, so Exodus and the scriptures, all right? So a lot of people, when we go to the Old Testament, their first question is, well, don't you all, follow the New Testament? But the reality is, if you are studying anything, it's best to study it holistically, which is to get a perspective from the Old Testament and the New Testament. For instance, if you have to study worship, I will advise you to study worship from the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it's good to get a holistic picture of the scripture, because all scripture is given by God. All right, so in Romans 15 and verse 4, Paul says, for whatever things were written in earlier times was written for our instruction, all right, so that through perseverance and encouragement of the scriptures, we might have hope. So whenever you see this word scriptures in the Bible, in the New Testament especially, it's referring to the old, what we know as the Old Testament, Genesis to Malachi, not Malachi to Genesis, Genesis to Malachi. Whenever I see this word scriptures, they are referring to the canon of the Old Testament, right? It was compiled years before Jesus came. The Old Testament would have been compiled. They had access to it. They had access to to something called the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Old Testament. They had access to these things. So when Paul here talks about the scriptures, he's talking about the Old Testament, which would include books like Exodus, all right? In 2 Timothy, we know this one, chapter 3, verse 16, all scripture is inspired by God or God-breathed and is profitable, which means it's advantageous. So there's benefit from all the scriptures, not just the New Testament, all right? So it's profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training or instruction in righteousness. I love these next two scriptures here because it hones in on Jesus. In Luke 24, verse 27, the Bible says that then beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself in all the scriptures. Then he goes a bit further in verse 44 and 45 of the same Luke 24. Now he said unto them, these are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things which are written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. Watch verse 45. Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. So the scriptures is really a collection of the law of Moses, which is the first 5 books, the prophets, which many consider from Joshua up the road, and all the minor and major prophets. And then the Psalms, which was also known as the writings, which included books like Job, Songs of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs. So when Jesus says here the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms, he's referring to all the scriptures, all the 39 books that we know. And Jesus is saying that inside of the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms, there are things written about me. And the law of Moses is where we find the book of Exodus. And so in Exodus, we're going to see some things about Jesus. But I wanted to highlight this because I don't want to just think that the Old Testament is no good and we just follow in the new. Yes, in terms of how a man attains righteousness and how to live faithfully to God, the New Testament has a lot to say about that, the gospel, the spirit, but the nature of God, right? The purpose and will of God is clearly seen in the Old Testament as well. And there's much to be gained from studying the Old Testament. All right. So let's just take a look at some background stuff to the book of Exodus, just to give you an idea as to what the book is about. What are some things that are in the book? What are some things that are important, or which I think are important, if you are going to take a study in the book of Exodus? All right. So it's part of what is called the Pentateuch or the Torah. All right, you're gonna hear those words. You probably, if you're doing research, you're gonna come across those words. You probably came across it before. The Pentateuch is the Greek expression for the law of Moses. It's translated the 5 volumes or the 5 scrolls. By the time Jesus came around, the world had already been Hellenized. The Greek language was a popular language. In fact, the New Testament is written in Greek primarily, and so this word, the Pentateuch, was used to refer to those first 5 books, the law of Moses. The Torah it refers to the same thing, but it's a Hebrew expression. So the Pentateuch is Greek and the Torah is Hebrew, and it means instruction in holiness. All right. So you're going to come across those words, and part of the Pentateuch is the book of Exodus. So you have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. All right. So those make up the Pentateuch or the Torah. The word Exodus, it means a departure from, and this is what we know the book as. The book is actually the Hebrew name for the book is actually Elishem, and it means these are the names, and it comes from the first verse of Exodus chapter 1. I think I have that in a slide somewhere. But that's actually the Hebrew name of the book, but we know it as Exodus, and it aptly describes one of the major events in Israel's history, which is a departure from Egypt, right? So this is what the book is gonna deal with. So some of the main characters in the book of Exodus include God, Moses, Moses' brother Aaron, Pharaoh. I think there are 2 pharaohs that are referred to, and of course the people of Israel. So these are some of the main characters. Of course, there are others that you'll come across, like sister and whatnot, father-in-law, Moses' father-in-law, and all that kind of stuff. But these are the main characters that you would find in the book. So during this time, just before Israel had really, come to any kind of prominence, at least from a scripture standpoint, what was happening in the world at the time, Egypt had been dominated by a foreign people called the Hyksos or the Hyksos, and they were foreigners. They were invaders, and they dominated and they defeated the Egyptians. And so the Egyptians, they didn't have a fondness towards foreigners. And I think that's a critical piece of information as you think about the book of Exodus, because what you're going to see in chapters 1 and 2 is that they had favor from the Pharaoh that Joseph knew. But when that Pharaoh died and a new Pharaoh came, he immediately recanted. He immediately turned against the Israelites. And it's as though nothing ever happened in the past, because they had a certain outlook towards foreign, nations, foreign people amongst them, because of the bad experience with the Hyksos. All right. So that's why we see that sudden change in the Egyptian. And so they would have been in power for a long time. And one of the ways they stayed that way is because of how they viewed foreigners that were living amongst them, right? So keep that in mind. There's a lot of, I will periodically refer to some Near Eastern things, some cultural things that I think is important in understanding why the Bible is saying this, or why this is happening, or how could they do that. One of them is when they worship the golden calf, and Aaron of all people built the golden calf. Many of us may look at that and be like, wow, these people, they just come out of captivity. God just delivered them. Moses just went up in the mountain, and that's what they're doing. But there is some cultural background that I think will make us a little more understanding of why, some of the things are spoken about in the way they are. All right. So I'll periodically mention them, but I'll try to keep them to a minimum, because I don't want to make this into a seminary session and talk over anybody's head. I want to keep it as simple as possible, so that, again, you can take it and put it into practice, because at the end of the day, we want you to be closer to God. We want, all of us to have be more diligent in service in his kingdom. And part and parcel of that is having a clearer understanding of the word of God. So I'm going to try and make it as plain as I could make it. That's the best I could do. All right, so let's go a bit further with the background. So we have in scripture in Genesis 15, verse 13, and then Acts 7, verse 6, they refer to the 400 years of oppression. So they refer to Israel's time, with Egypt and all that kind of stuff, as 400 years of oppression. But then in Exodus 12, verse 40, and Galatians 3, verse 16 to 17, they have 430 years of oppression. And a lot of Bible critics and skeptics, they point out these things and they say these are inconsistencies. And so the Bible must be not, true. The message is invalid, because here there are some things that are not, corresponding. They're contradicting. But I believe there's a simple explanation. And I did send out a link in the chat. If you didn't get the link, let me know. But I want you to take a look at the article is, the article is good. But what I really want you to look at in the article is the chart. Is the chart that the person did. And what they would have done, they would have added up all the years. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. They did all the work. And they would have added up all the years, and they would have traced the 430 years, and would have traced the 400 years. And interestingly, the 430 years goes all the way back to when Abraham left Haran. So if you track the 430 years, it's going to go back to when he was 75 years old, back when God called him out of Haran to a land where he would show him. When you trace the 400 years, it's going to come at when Isaac was 5 years old. Many believe that's the time that corresponds to when those children were weaned. And that's the time the Bible actually mentions that he was being persecuted by Hagar and her child. And interestingly enough, Hagar is an Egyptian. So it's interesting that when Stephen in Acts 7, verse 6 refers to the time of persecution or bondage, he goes with the 400 years, because the 400 years goes back to technically when Isaac, which was where the seed was first persecuted by an Egyptian. That's interesting, because Stephen was facing some persecution. And then in Galatians, Paul's emphasis in Galatians in this particular passage wasn't the persecution, but was Abraham's promise. And if you check Abraham's promise, you have to go all the way back to when Abraham left Haran in Genesis 12. And so it seems to fit the purpose of each of the writers. So when Stephen used 400 years, he had a particular purpose. He had a particular place he was going in the sermon, and 400 years suited that purpose, going back to the first time of the persecution. Hagar and her son and Isaac. And in Galatians, Paul's purpose seemed to have been pointing out the promise of the seed. We can talk about that on Sunday. And so it makes sense that he goes back to when Abraham left Haran. That's when God first gave him the promise, right? So, and the link is there in the church chat. And if you didn't get it, just let me know. I'll send the link to you. And you can read that article and you can read the chat. It's really a well done chat. It was so well done, I didn't have a need to do anything. So I just, use this guy's chat and you can check it out. And he has all the dates and all the years, all the scriptures, everything's right there. You can go do that research for yourself and it's going to become pretty plain. But just to make you aware of that, because this years of bondage, that's kind of the main point in the early parts of this chapter, that God is going to bring them out. God is going to be faithful to his promise that he gave in Genesis 15, that they will serve a nation, but he's going to bring them out of this 400 years. So 400 years is a long time, but remember, God doesn't have a calendar. God doesn't operate on our time, right? God is not on the clock, all right? He operates in his good own time, and his time is the right time. It's always the right time, all right? So keep that in your mind as you go through the book. All right, let's go back and let's give a little more background information here. So the author, many believe, is Moses. Numbers 33, 1 and 2, Deuteronomy 1, 1, John 5, verse 6. Jesus talks about what Moses wrote. Deuteronomy, there's a reference to what Moses wrote. Numbers 33, 1 and 2, there's also a reference to what Moses wrote. So, most tradition, people get cute today, but most traditions hold Moses to be the author of the 5 books, all right? Even if some believe he had a scribe, somebody writing for him, that still counts. But many believe that, Moses is the author. So we're going to stay right there. The date of the book, I'm just going to put this out there. There are 2 suggested dates. There's an early date and a late date. There's archaeological evidence to support the late date, but there's biblical evidence to support the early date, all right? So like in 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, Judges chapter 11, verse 6, Acts 7, verse 30. All right, there are some times that I mentioned there. You probably want to go there and read it for yourself. In 1 Kings, actually, let me get that and read it a little bit. I think I might want to read that. But we're not going to go into all the gymnastics about counting the numbers, but you could do that for yourself. 1 Kings 6, verse 1. As soon as I get 1 Kings, I'll read it. All right, so it says there, now it came about in the 480th year after the sons of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel. So in the 4th year of Solomon's reign, it was 480 years after the children of Israel came out of Egypt. So when, historians trace it back, these are the dates they have. And dates are not exactly in the Bible, because the Bible, though it does have historical information, it is not a history book. All right. So dates are not exact in the Bible. So even these suggested dates are still good, really good guesses. But I choose to stick with what the biblical evidence leads, and the biblical evidence leads to the earlier date, but I'm not going to make that a heaven and hell matter. But I just thought, just to be thorough, I would put this in your study. The setting, we're going to read that just now, Exodus 1, verse 8. Really, it's speaking about Israel. They are now in Egypt. So you can go back and read Genesis 37 to 50 if you want as well. And it's just a transition. From there, they are now in Egypt. They are growing. They're in favor with one Pharaoh. That Pharaoh dies, and another Pharaoh, he arises. So that's going to be pretty much the setting of all this stuff is going to lead into all the discussion in the book of Exodus. All right, so in terms of geographical setting, they are in Egypt. They are then going into the wilderness, particularly Mount Sinai. Much of the book is Israel at Mount Sinai, by the way. All right. So much of the book is that's the setting. All right. Politically, you have these two pharaohs that you see on your screen here, Thutmose or Thutmosis, as some say, the third, or Ramses the second. They are the only pharaohs who would have ruled for 40 years or more. All right, so based on what Acts 7 and verse 30 says, and Exodus 2 and verse 23, it seems to be a 40-year period that would have elapsed. That's when Moses was in the wilderness in Midian. Right, that's when he ran away from killing the Egyptian. So many believe it's one of these two pharaohs. Thutmosis, he would have reigned for like 54 years, and Ramses reigned for like 66 years. So that's how people come about with the dates for the book and all that kind of stuff. But I said, we're not going to make that a heaven and hell matter, but just one of these two, I believe, would have been the pharaohs at the time. But the Bible doesn't say who he is. These are just, again, educated guesses. But just so that you would know, so that when you're reading and you're researching, you wouldn't be too confused by the plethora of data that is out there and the amount of things that people write about these facts that we don't know too much about. So I'm going to leave it there. Just admit that we don't know too much about it. Religiously speaking, the world, the Near Eastern religions, all, if not most of them, if not all of them, are polytheistic in nature. And I think that's a critical thing to understand as we think about the God bringing them out of Egypt, because these people would have been familiar with a polytheistic system of worship. By the way, polytheistic simply means many gods. So they believe in a system that has many, different gods. Gods for the rain, gods for fertility, gods for the sun. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about the plagues. All right. But this was a familiar thing in most Eastern religions, Near Eastern religions. So the Bible tells us in Joshua 24 that Abraham, their father, he served gods while he was in the Ur of the Chaldeans, right? Ancient Babylon. So, and then the land where they were going to, the land of Canaan, they had a polytheistic system as well. So it wasn't a strange thing for Israel to struggle with idolatry. When I was younger, I used to be like, wait, these Israel people real hard, not realizing I had just like them too. But I used to be like, wait, these people real hard, boy. Why they keep going back to idolatry? But when I learned that the world that surrounded them was steeped in a polytheistic outlook or theological perspective, it made sense why it was so ingrained in them. So when God came and God come and say in the wilderness, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God. That was a strange thing. That would have been so strange to the ears of the Israelites, because everything they knew had many gods. The ancient Babylon, Egypt, Canaan, everywhere it turned. The Assyrians, everybody had multiple gods. But here comes this Yahweh, I the Lord, I'm your God, and I'm one God. That's a strange thing. So keep that in mind as you read some of the events that are in the book. All right. We talked about the next point here in the class genre. Some of the major genre the major genre is narrative. Most of the book is narrative, right? So it's pretty simple to understand. Then there's the legal language. We're going to talk, that's when God gives all the laws, the 10 commandments, the sundry laws, and all that kind of stuff. And then there's some poetry, I believe, the Song of Moses, that falls into that category of poetry. There may be some others somewhere in there. I don't remember offhand. But I know chapter 15, the Song of Moses, that's a form of poetry there. But the major genre, remember we talked about genre in the class, always know what type of genre you're looking at when you're studying. But the major one in Exodus is narrative, all right? So that makes it pretty decent in terms of understanding, all right? So that's gonna make it pretty good. It means we could move at some pace, but not too much pace. In terms of the purpose of the book, I did highlight Exodus 1 verse 8, so you can read this in your own time, and this pretty much sets things up. We know of the people that came into Egypt. That's what it talks about there. So I've highlighted there. These are the names, right? So Elishem, That's the Hebrew title of the book right there. And so the Hebrews didn't say Exodus. All right, they would refer to it as, well, Law of Moses or whatever the case, or Torah, and then the Elishem. And I think Numbers as well, the book of Numbers, that's our title, but that's not the Hebrew title for Numbers. I can't remember it offhand. I think it's Beritva or something like that. But anyway, that's the Hebrew title, and it gives us all the nations that came into, all the people, that came into Egypt. Joseph was already there, keep that in mind. And then all the others came after. Joseph died. The sons became fruitful. So God, the promise that God gave that he's going to make of Abraham a great nation, we see this coming to fruition. And then verse 8 sets things up for the rest of the book right there. Now a new king rose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And then we go into all the narrative from there. And that's what we're going to do in the coming weeks. We're going to talk about what happened after they had grown and experienced with the new king in Egypt and all that stuff. We're going to talk about all of that as we go down the line, right? But I want to leave this here with you as well, the purpose of Exodus. All right, so historically, the book shows the preservation of Israel. All right, so this is key theologically as well. From a theological standpoint, this is key because God's promise throughout the Bible, from Genesis 3:15, and we're going to talk about that on Sunday, and it went to the seed of Abraham and the root of David until it came to fruition in the person of Jesus. So the preservation of Israel is a significant thing to keep your eye on as you study the Bible. All right, because if Israel ever goes out of existence, God's promise is going to fail because God has to bring a seed through this nation. So a big part of God being faithful to his promise is the preservation of Israel. So this is a historical fact, but it's a major theme, theologically speaking, from the Bible's perspective, right? Theologically, as we look at Exodus in particular now, the book reveals the nature of God. So we see, God, the faithfulness, making covenant, judgment, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to talk about it. It reveals who God is. So, and again, this is why studying the Old Testament books are important, because we see, I personally, we see God in a more vivid way. Maybe I just like a lot of action stuff and like to see stuff moving. So I've always loved the Old Testament for that, and that we see a lot of ways God is described, and Exodus is not short of that at all. So theologically speaking, the book reveals the nature of God, and we see that manifest in him making the covenant, in him delivering Israel from Egypt, in him judging Egypt, in him instructing them to build a tabernacle. These instructions are not just coming up because God just God has had time to burn, but this is coming from the nature of God, all right? And we're going to see that come out in the book, so I'm going to talk too much on that. And then lastly, from an instructional standpoint, the book shows us how to maintain covenant relationship with God, all right? So it gives us the premise, which is God's salvation, the cause, the catalyst, God's salvation, but then it goes into how to maintain that relationship with God. So while we are not under the law today, the principles of being obedient to God, all right, and maintaining that relationship, how God operates in a covenant, that hasn't changed. The covenant has changed, but how God functions, right, in a covenant, and how he expects the other party to function in a covenant, that has not changed. And that comes out in the book as well. So we're going to highlight these things as we go along. So some of the major themes that we're going to see in the book: deliverance, of course, the big one being deliverance after 400 years of slavery and oppression and just not being in the land or where God wanted them to be. God is going to deliver them from all that stuff. So that's the big one. Judgment. Judgment is seen not only in Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt, but judgment is seen in his people. Because when God gives laws and people don't follow the law, God's judgment ensues. So we see judgment in that light as well. A major theme in the book is if I could word it as a theme, I don't think I worded it properly, but Israel, God's special people. All right, so God's peculiar people, We see that come out in the book. God is going to spend a lot of time talking about the covenant in this book and establishing it and how he's going to dwell with them. And so that is clear in the book. We'll talk about that. That comes out. And then, of course, the covenant relationship. Most of the book, I think from about chapter 20, 19, all the way to chapter 40, is, is about, covenant relationship. And maybe a case could be made. We could check it from about chapter 15. All right. So, but these are some of the major things that are going to come out in the book as we go through it. All right. Let me leave you with an outline. Of course, these slides, this presentation will be available. Just don't sell it. It will be available, so you can always go through this again. The recording will be on YouTube within the next couple of days. Take some time to upload and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be on the YouTube channel in a couple of days. So you can always go back and listen to it to be, just to refresh your minds. In case you miss anything, you have that option. So this is there are many outlines to the book, but I found two that I think I want to use. I want to share with you. So this first one here, Yahweh's Deliverance, chapters 1 to 12. So that's going to cover these are the names that came to Egypt all the way to the final plague, all right, and the Passover. Then Yahweh's guidance, all right. So chapters 13, when they left and Pharaoh was following them, and they were in the wilderness for a little while, and God, did the miracles, bringing water for them, the bitter water and all that kind of stuff. Yahweh's guidance, we're gonna see that, and so we won't study it like this, but I wanted to have this available so that, let's say, like next week, we'll be looking at chapters 1, 2, and 3. You will know that chapters 1, 2, and 3 fall into the category of Yahweh's deliverance. So it's within that context that we'll be discussing things in chapters 1 to 3. So hence the purpose of the outline. It's really helpful. Yahweh's new people and covenant, chapters 19 to 24. So significant stuff takes place there because he brings them out, but he doesn't just bring them out and makes them a people with no name, no status. He makes them a new people and he gives them a covenant. So we're going to talk about that when that time gets there. And of course, Yahweh's worship. As you see in there, a bulk of the book focuses on that part there. So that's important to take note of. There are some key relationships, all right, that we see in the book naturally. The first one, Moses and the Lord. We see that from chapters 1 through 7, verse 7. That's when, Moses is born. He's raised in Pharaoh's house. He fights for the Israelites. They don't like it. Somebody hears about it. So he's on the run for his life. He's in Midian. God calls him and commissions him. That whole interaction with him and God, that's that first section there. So you can also look at Exodus within this slide. And then there's a slight shift with Moses and Pharaoh. So now Moses is back into Egypt. He is Pharaoh, and this is where all the miracles take place. This is where Pharaoh goes after him, and they die in the Red Sea, and all that stuff takes place between this pericope right here. Then we see Moses and the people. That's when they made the bitter water, when the man was picking up stones. So there's a little time period where Moses is with the people, and there's a little emphasis there. That happens naturally. And then again, the bulk of the book, the Lord and the people. So whatever outline you get, you're going to find an outline where the back end is heavy. Most of the categorization takes up most of the chapters in the back end. So the Lord and his people, covenant, the tabernacle, or the sanctuary, all the sundry laws, the priestly laws, what's going to be in it, all that stuff. We're going to see that in that part of the book. And so we can also look at the book from this slide as well. All right. So again, this is not exhaustive. This introduction is not exhaustive, but I did try to pull out some of the key things that I think is important that I simply couldn't leave out as you head into the book from next week, Lord's willing. So as you go into the book from next week, what you could do, you could go back on YouTube. I will let you know in the chat when the video is uploaded, so you could go back and look at it. You'll have the slide available. You could take a look at it and in preparation for next week. And of course, you want to read chapters 1, 2, and 3 for next week, Lord's willing. And whatever plan you decided to read the book of Exodus with, try and stick to the plan. I am just asking you to read one chapter a day. So if you do that, by next week, you should be in chapter 7, or I think chapter 8. Chapter 8, right? And you will be through the book at least twice, which will be extremely helpful as you go through the course. A lot of stuff is going to make more sense, all right? So I do have a question for you that I want to leave tonight, right? So I want to ask, and anybody can answer, you know, if you want, and this will take us up to when we want to close. What advantage does a Christian have today from reading and studying the Old Testament? All right, so we have just done an introduction on, you know, what we're gonna cover, the setting for Exodus, what it's all about. But if you still have that nagging question in your mind, what, because I know people who, you know, I hear people tell me, a commentator who tell me all they need is the New Testament. I was like, well, now they can't get a full picture of God or his will if you just read the New Testament. So then what advantage? So Sister Anne, you go ahead.
You read from even Genesis, from creation.
Yeah.
Because I did that with the 7 to 9 class recently.
Good.
And it's amazing. Not 7 to 9, 10 to 12, sorry. It's amazing to just, you read the first few verses of Genesis. And if you really go into it in depth as to the order with which God created the heavens and the earth and everything that he created at that time, it opened my eyes to the really awesomeness and how much God loves us, how much time he took to prepare an earth for us to dwell in. And the blessing started from there. So a study of the Old Testament gets into helps you to understand the mind of God, how much he values his creation, us, his people. You know, every detail that he went through to create the world for us to live in. And then he said, you know, be fruitful and multiply and replenish, you know, replenish the earth. I got a new understanding of God and how much he loves us. Mm-hmm. All right. So reading the Old Testament, if you study it diligently, all through Exodus, Leviticus, the laws, the Psalms, and so you get so much encouragement, so much hope, so much determination to remain faithful. Of course, sometimes, as you say, you would, you know, criticize the people and say, how could they do such a thing? But it shows you the mercy of God, how God is patient and long-suffering, but also how just he is, you know, because it may seem sometimes as if, you know, he favors one set of people above the other, but it's not that. It is he knowing the heart of the person. In times when they made mistakes, those he struck down and those he didn't. And basically, it's the difference between a repentant heart and a rebellious heart. You know? So the Old Testament paves the way for us to really understand why Jesus would come to redeem us. The whole plan is redemption from scratch. From the word go, is to have us have a relationship with God, you know, and whatever it took for him to allow us to have that relationship with him, he would do it, you know. That is my piece.
Well said, well said. Anybody else wanna share on this question here. What advantage does a Christian have today from reading the Old and studying the Old Testament? What has been your experience? Does anybody want to share again?
Brother Travel, good night.
Yes, go ahead. Good night.
When I read the Old Testament, I see the nature of God, and I see his unrelenting love for us. Despite how much we turn to our many idols, he never gives us up. And I'm so thankful for that. That just strengthened me as a Christian.
Amen. 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 All right, well, if anybody's in that place where you're in a struggle with the Old Testament, I know it's a little tedious to get through, but I guarantee you, as I always said before, I know it's always said before, it's definitely going to give you a clearer picture as you step into the beauty and the goodness of the New Testament. As I think Sister Anne was talking about, paving the way for Christ, and we're going to talk about that on Sunday. It just helps you get that better understanding. It's like, you ever watch a movie and it's like it had a lot of missing pieces, to bits that you didn't quite understand, and then they bring out this prequel and they're like, and everything has to make sense after that. That's almost the case, not that I'm relegating it to movies, but that's almost the experience, in having a grasp of the old and then, looking at the new, having the two together. It's really a blessing and a benefit. I think maybe in our efforts to, refute, false teachings regarding the Old Testament, maybe we haven't spent, enough time emphasizing how important and how significant the Old Testament is. But hopefully we could draw some of that out as we look at the Old Testament books this year. The first one will be in Exodus, and the next one, will be announced later on. But hopefully in our studies of the Old Testament, we can, grow in our appreciation for that. But I thank you for your time. I thank you for your patience. And so from next week, Lord's willing, we are getting into the book. We are going to chapters 1, 2, and 3. And we're drawing some stuff. We're getting some lessons. We're learning. And of course, we want to be able to discuss some things. So next week, be prepared for that. And please do your readings. Please look at the link. Check out the chat. And anything I send in the chat regarding the class, just look out for it, please. I know the chat could, some days could be a little busy, but, just be sure to, I'll try and put some alerts by it so you will know it's related to the class and I want you to go read it. So just look out for that as you go through. So thank you for your time. I want to ask Brother Anthony if he's still on. Somebody has something in the chat here. Right, gives you a better appreciation of the new. That is so true, Sister Carmen.